In this lesson, we're going to show you how to use the aggregate transform. The aggregate transform is used to roll up data, much like the T-SQL statement does for group by. Just like the group by statement in T-SQL, only the columns checked will actually move out of this transform. It is an asynchronous, fully blocking transform, which means it can cause some performance issues, so it's important to keep that in mind. So let's cover some of the options that you have available to you in the aggregate transform. In the aggregate transform, when you first open up the aggregate transform editor, you can see a list of columns that you have available to you. Keep in mind, only the columns that you check here will be available for future transforms downstream. Next, check the column that you wish. Then specify the operation that you wish to use. For example, in this case, I'm aggregating based on product ID. By a group by statement. The list that you see here is dependent on what data type this column is. In this case, this column is an integer column, which means I have counts available, group bys, count distinct, sums, averages, and min and max. Also for date times you'll have those kind of data available. For varchar columns, you only have things like count and count distinct available. Now that you know more about the aggregate transform, let's go ahead and try it. To complete this lab, you'll need to create a flat file that reads data out of the production.transaction history table, and produce a flat file that has the following columns. The product ID column, which will be the aggregate of all the product IDs, the last transaction date, which will be the last transaction date, so the maximum transaction date, and the sum of the total quantity and total cost. To perform this lab, I'm going to right-click on SSIS Packages and create a new package. I'm going to call this package Lesson18.dtsx. Now, as you know, as we've mentioned before, some of the video lessons may not match exactly the ones in the book as step-by-step instructions. So we'll call things slightly different than the exact names in the book, but the concept is still the same. First, I need to create an OLADB connection that points to my AdventureWorks database. If I did not see AdventureWorks, I would hit the New button here. Once I have that, over my toolbox, I want to bring over, start the package, I need to bring over a data flow task. Inside the data flow task, I want to drag over an OLADB source. Double click on the OLADB source, and select from the drop-down list, production.transaction history. You can also, from the drop-down box here, say select star from production.transaction history. Now in this case, I'm going to hit build query, and it's going to format the query to be appropriate here. So I know I need the last transaction date, the last product ID. I don't need transaction date. I don't need order number, and I don't need reference order ID. But I do need the transaction date. Don't need that. And I don't need the modified date. So hit OK, and this is a query you're going to use going forward. Next, drag an aggregate transform over, and again, I'm not naming these tasks appropriately, but you get the idea. Drag the green line in, double click on it, and each of these items here need to come down. So in my case, I'm going to group by the product ID. I want to get the maximum last transaction date, so I'm going to alias it as last transaction date. In addition, I want to go ahead and create a sum of the quantity and a sum of the actual cost. So I'll just call this total quantity and total cost. I'll hit OK. And I'm now ready to send this to a flat file. So I'll drag a flat file destination over, connect it up, double click on it, and I'm going to create a brand new connection manager that's delimited. So I'll call this aggregate file. You can call it whatever you like again, and I'll put it into a folder, txt. I'll make the column names on the first row, go to columns, just confirm that all the columns look good, hit advanced. Now in your case, you would not see the data that I have right here. I'm seeing this data because I already have a lesson18.txt file already there. Hit advanced, you can see the data types have already been set for us. Hit OK. Go to mappings to confirm that everything matches up the way you want it. Hit OK one more time, and let's right-click on the package to run it. Now everything should turn green. As you can see, 113,000 rows and some change go into the transform. Only 441 come out. Go back to progress, and you can look at any kind of errors that occurred. You can look at here. Okay, now that you've tried it out, Lesson 18 has talked about the aggregate transform, and it's used to roll up data, or basically apply a group by statement to the data. Only the columns that you check will come out of this transform, so columns that you do not check will be ignored. Also, this is a fully blocking transform, which basically means that as all the rows go into it, 118,000 rows or 500,000 rows, everything will come to a screeching halt until all the rows reach that transform, are aggregated up, and then they start coming out at that point. So be careful and be wary when you use this. This should not be used for only DB sources. You should mainly use this for reading data out of a flat file or an Excel spreadsheet or things like that you can't run queries on. In our next lesson, we'll get deeper into other transforms in the data flow.